So my talk tonight is entitled The Other Shobogenzo, Exploring Dogen's 300 Koan Collection. And as I was preparing for this talk, especially in the last 24 hours, I thought to myself, what does this have to do with anything? You know? And I really kind of had it's like, should I just cancel it? I mean, it just doesn't feel right. There's so much going on. But, we already said we were going to do a talk. So last night, as I was reflecting on it, I just thought, well, what are koans? I mean, what are these about if they're not about now, this very moment? And these koans, these stories, these ancient, very short dialogues, exchanges from 1,000 or more years ago, even 2,000 years ago, were moments, time, like an exchange between two people or more, a person and a thing, just like we have every day, just like putting on the mask, just like drinking a cup of tea, just like the pine tree in the courtyard. And so, that's, I was reminded, that's why I love koans, is because they're about the everyday, because they're about our experience now, through the eyes, perhaps, of the ancestors. And so I think it is appropriate to talk about koans if we remember why we're here. And I always have to remind myself, why do I study? Why do I practice? For the benefit of all beings. It's not so I can have mind candy and, so I can be clever. It's so that I can learn how to open myself and be present for others, and how to learn how to serve. So with that motivation, I invite you to join me in exploring a little bit about koans. I don't know much, but I've done some study for this talk, and what especially sparked my interest was this other shobogenzo. So some of you may have heard of, the shobogenzo, what we usually call the shobogenzo, which is Dogen, I guess you can't see him, who's above my shoulder. Dogen, the founder of our Soto lineage of Zen, wrote this, The Treasury of the True Dharma I. And this is Kaz Tanahashi's translation, along with many other teachers and scholars. And this is a collection of fascicles or chapters where Dogen explores, in large part, a number of koans. But he didn't call them koans. Actually, he called them kosoku, which are ancestral criteria, or inen, circumstances and causes or results of a story. He didn't refer to those as koans. In fact, when koan shows up in the shobogenzo, it's in Genjo koan. Thank you. Which I talked about before. And I talked about Genjo koan. I'm so backwards. I talked about Genjo koan in that phrase as one of these. When he talked about these koans, he called them something else, and koan meant the fundamental point or the absolute reality. So, I'm a slow learner, but I'm getting there, maybe. So the shobogenzo, he explores these, and we've gone through many of these together, and hope to do so for forever. The other shobogenzo is, this one is John Dido Laurie's, Roshi's commentary in verse, which is also translated by Kaz Tanahashi sensei, and the koans themselves. And it's a collection of 300 koans that Dogen collected over some years when he was in China studying. And it was also a disputed text. So we had this 300 koan collection for a long time, but only in like 1934, I think, did they finally find a text that proved, I guess, that he had actually collected these koans. And so Dido Laurie Roshi took the koans and went through them like some of these ancient collections of koans that I'll talk about, and wrote commentaries and verses. So it's a fascinating book to compare to the others and to read in itself. But what struck me so much was, wow, 300 koans, that's a lot. How many koans are in the other collections? And so just to kind of go through, and then we'll compare a few of the koans. Some of the famous koan collections that you'll hear about. This is the Blue Cliff Record, the Heikigan Roku. And that has 100 koans in it. And we have the Muman Kan, Gateless Gate, or actually No Gate Gate, or it's a different word. It's No Door Gate, the doorless gate. But we commonly hear it, the Gateless Gate. That has 48 koans. This is the one that starts with, does a dog have Buddha nature? Mu, right? And then we've got the Denkuroku, Transmitting the Light, which is the stories, these collections that I just mentioned, the Blue Cliff Record and the Gateless Gate or Gateless Barrier, they don't really have a theme. They're just different stories with commentary and verse from these ancient masters. Transmitting the Light is the stories of the ancestors from Buddha Shakyamuni on down to Dogen and even his disciple, Eijo. And Keizan put these together. And these are fascinating because they have the case, which you can sometimes find in the other collections, but they also have a long commentary on the person that they're talking about. So Bodhidharma, it tells about Bodhidharma's life in a short form, and what he did and where he went, and kind of the causes and conditions of that story. And it's a beautiful one to study our lineage too. For those of you doing Jukai, definitely check out Denkuroku. Here's another version of Denkuroku by Cleary. This one's Cook. And then there's the Book of Serenity, or Book of Equanimity, which is another 100 koans. And so these 5 or so books, there's also the Iron Flute, there's some miscellaneous koans and some other koan collections. These are kind of what we commonly think of as the koan collections of today. Now Dogen's 300, so that each of these has about 100, so there's maybe 400 or 500 in the stack. So Dogen's 300 is kind of like, wow, 300 koans. I wondered to myself, how many of those match with the other koans? Where did they come from? Are they just copies of the books, or are they something else? And so I just wanted to share a little my exploration, and just from reading the forward here and reading another book, which is really illuminating, which is Stephen Hines' Dogen and the Koan Tradition, A Tale of Two Shobugenzos. So this kind of says it all. It's a really scholarly and fascinating book, where at the end he correlates each of the koans in the 300 Shobogenzo and shows where they show up in the other texts of Dogen, and where you can find them in the ancient Chinese collections. So that's kind of like a map that I only just got into. I was like, oh man, this is so cool. So, but what I learned from this is that Dogen did not get these koans from any of these collections. In fact, there were about 16 listed here, collections, Chinese collections of koans that he drew from. And apparently the Muman Kan and the Denkuroku were not, or actually Denkuroku, none of these books were available at the time except for the Blue Cliff Record, which apparently was around. And so they say he spent all night on his last night in China copying out the text to bring back with him. But according to Stephen Hine, those ones are not copied verbatim into his 300 koans. They come from different sources. And there are a lot of crossovers, a lot of ones that are there. I didn't have time to go through every single one and check against all the other collections, but I'd like to one day and make a big map. If anybody out there knows if this map exists, please tell me. I really Googled for it. Why I wanted to do that was to see, because each of these collections isn't just koans, it has commentaries and verses, and it's just so illuminating for me to to hear what other people have to say about it. And just to say something about koan study versus koan introspection or koan practice, you often hear about koan practice and think of the dialogues with the teacher and the student. You memorize a dialogue, you bring it into the dokusan room, you present it. The teacher might ask you a question and then you answer it in a non-conceptual way, like shouting or hitting something or bowing, or maybe you say something, but it makes sense in an oblique way. And then through this way, you either pass the koan or you don't. So that's a kind of koan practice that we don't really do here at Upaya, but it is part of our lineage, and others teach this way, like Bernie Glassman Roshi taught koan curricula, and Enkyo Roshi and others. And we use it in parts of our own practice, but mostly we use koans in the study form. So if we call that the introspection form, the study form is more what Dogen in his kind of, it's called the Kana Shobogenzo, the Japanese Shobogenzo. The other one's Mana Shobogenzo or Chinese Shobogenzo. So in the Kana Shobogenzo, what we normally call the Shobogenzo, he looks at koans and discusses them from different angles. It's definitely not like an analytical approach. It's not like studying, like you'd study math or something like that. But it's also not just like a shout. He writes a lot. These chapters can be long. And that's the kind of study that we engage in here to a certain extent, both self-study and in Dharma talks and together. And I hope Kozan and I are planning on doing koan study sessions after we're done with NVC. Or I guess it's up to the community what we do next. I'm open. I'd love to study koans with all of you at some point. And so in studying them, as I was saying at the beginning, there's these moments in time, and I'd like to look at a couple with you that span some of the collections. And so, to begin with, just to start, I want to read, and here I'm going to read a little bit, just to give some taste of these things. So Dogen wrote a preface to the 300 Shobogenzo, the Mana Shobogenzo. The treasury of the true Dharma eye was held up by Great Master Shakyamuni, but has it been investigated thoroughly? Though through direct transmission, I have received it more than 2,180 years later. So this was Dogen 1,200 years ago. Or wait, how long ago? 800 years ago? He died in 1250, right? 1254. The Buddha's Dharma children and Dharma grandchildren in close and remote schools number myriad and myriad, 3 before and 3 after. Would you like to know the origin of this teaching? Long ago, in front of millions of beings on Vulture Peak, when the world-honored one held up a flower and winked, Mahakashyapa smiled. The world-honored one approved it and said, I have the treasury of the true Dharma eye, wondrous mind of nirvana. I entrust it to the great Mahakashyapa. And he goes on a little bit, but I love that. And then he ends with, here are the 300 cases clarified by the ancestors. On behalf of them, I am presenting the cases to you for appreciation of their ancient splendor. And I love it. He always has these colophons. Written on the winter solstice, the first year of the Kate era, 1235. Dogen, abbot of Kanandori, Koshoshorin Monastery, monastic transmitting the Dharma from China, writes this preface. It's like so there, there it was, 1235. I wonder if in 1,000 years, people are going to say, 2020, Pai Zen Center. Hunt put on a mask and smiled. Something like that. What are the moments in our life that will become koans? Maybe not koans that last in books for 1,000 years, but moments that we use, when we preach the Dharma, when we share with each other, with good friends. Here was a moment that really changed something for me, a turning moment, they call it. And And it's inspiring for me to read these moments, because it reminds me that any moment can be a moment. They're so ordinary. So without further ado, a couple of the moments. The first one I wanted to look at is about that moment that he talks about in the preface. Shakyamuni Buddha holds up a flower. This shows up in Gateless Gate, number 6. It shows up in Transmitting the Light, number 2. It shows up in Dogen's Kana Shobogenzo, number 68, and it shows up in Dogen's Mana Shobogenzo, number 253. And it also shows up in many other places. This is Dogen's extensive record, the Eihei Koroku, which is more his like notes of talks he gave in the monastery. There's just so much Dogen to study. It shall never be exhausted. So in the Mana Shobogenzo, so this is the, I'll read the main case, and then a little bit of the commentary from Dido, Laurie, Roshi. One day, the world-honored one held up a flower in front of the assembly of myriad beings and twirled it. Mahakashyapa alone smiled. The world-honored one said, I entrust the treasury of the true Dharma I of all Buddhas to Mahakashyapa. Laurie Roshi says, the treasury of the true Dharma I has never been given to others and has never been received by another. Because of this, the world-honored one held up the flower and revealed the truth. Mahakashyapa did not conceal it and smiled. The lifeblood of Shakyamuni intermingled with that of Mahakashyapa and flowed into past, present, and future. Do you see it? The commentaries, the verses are these beautiful ways of kind of seeing the koans from different angles. You know, they're so short and so kind of ordinary. You just read it and you're just kind of like, okay. And yet to know that practitioners have sat with these for probably millions of hours over thousands of years, hundreds of years, let's say, and just plumb the depths of these over and over again. It's like there's so much richness there. So much of which hasn't been written down, but that's okay. Here in the Kana Shobogenzo, in the fascicle called the Udumbara Blossom. At the assembly of 1,000,000 beings on Vulture Peak, the world-honored one held up an Udumbara blossom and blinked. Then Mahakashyapa smiled. The world-honored one said, I have the treasury of the true Dharma I, the wondrous heart of nirvana. I entrust it to Mahakashyapa. So a little different. What was the main difference? Anybody hear it? Blinked, right? I didn't hear that in the first one. And you see that in other parts of text, blinking. I think in Genjo Koan it comes up. And then Dogen continues, the 7 original Buddhas and all Buddhas equally hold up this flower. They realize and manifest holding up the flower of going beyond. They break open and clarify holding up the flower right at this moment. This being so, going beyond and going within, self and other, and the going forward and going back of holding up the flower are all together holding up the entire flower. This is flower dimension, Buddha dimension, mind dimension, and body dimension. I just get chills. This is it's so Dogen. You read the Laurie Roshi, you're like, yeah, that's cool. And then you read Dogen, you're like, whoa, what just happened to me? And he goes on, it's a whole fascicle. That's just the beginning. I just want to give a little taste. And then Denkuroku. So in this one, like I said, this is the stories of the ancestors. So this is number 2, because the first is Shakyamuni Buddha's enlightenment. And number 2 is Mahakashyapa. They call him Makakasho, or Mahakashyapa. One day, the world-honored one offered up a flower with a twinkle in his eye. Makakasho's face broke out into a smile. The world-honored one said, I have the eye and treasury of the true law, the wondrous heart of nirvana, which I transmit to Makakasho. And Keizan goes on to explicate, Makakasho belonged to the Brahmin caste. His Indian name was Kashyapa, which means he of the tortoise or of the black-toothed clan. Whilst here in our country, he is known as the victorious and esteemed drinker of light. And then he goes on to a long just thing about who this was. And it also talks about the case. So as you can see, I just love listening to these little differences, sometimes just a translation. But I like, how can blinked get in where it wasn't at all before? You know, there was also some differences in the collections, in the originals probably. And finally, the Mumonkan, the gateless gate. Case 6, the world-honored one twirls a flower. The case. Once in ancient times, when the world-honored one was at Mount Gridhakutra, he twirled a flower before his assembled disciples. All were silent. Only Mahakashyapa broke into a smile. The world-honored one said, I have the eye treasury of right Dharma, the subtle mind of nirvana, the true form of no form, and the flawless gate of the teaching. It is not established upon words and phrases. It is a special transmission outside tradition. I now entrust this to Mahakashyapa. Woman's comment. Gold-faced Gautama insolently degrades noble people to commoners. He sells dog flesh under the sign of mutton and thinks it is quite commendable. Suppose that all the monks had smiled. Suppose that all the monks had smiled. How would the eye treasury have been transmitted? Or suppose that Mahakashyapa had not smiled. How could he have been entrusted with it? If you say the eye treasury can be transmitted, that would be as if the gold-faced old fellow were swindling people in a loud voice at the town gate. If you say the eye treasury cannot be transmitted, then why did the Buddha say that he entrusted it to Mahakashyapa? So that's woman. Little different feel, huh? I mean, it's just so fun. And so, I mean, all of these koans have been given countless Dharma talks, and I don't have anything to say about them, or have I studied them adequately enough, but I want to give the feel so that we can get inspired to do this study, which has been a part of Zen practice for so many centuries. And I think it's very rewarding. I mean, I've got a number of other ones. What time is it? Okay, sure. Do we have time for one more? The cypress tree in the garden. Have you heard that one? Anybody not heard it? The cypress tree in the garden? Okay. So first of all, sometimes you see the oak tree in the courtyard. And they say that cypress tree and oak tree are the same word in Chinese. And I just couldn't really believe that. So I looked it up, and Wendy, if you're there, and any other Chinese speakers, Ting qian bo shi, bo shu, Ting qian bo shu. And bo shu is this tree. And according to everything I've found, it's a cypress tree. It's an evergreen with flat leaves. I couldn't find that word was oak tree. So maybe there's another word in another version of the koans, but cypress tree, according to this one. And Ting qian is the courtyard. And so whenever I read this koan, I think of our pine tree in the courtyard out here. And I don't know, have you seen this picture of Upaya when it was like when they first put that Buddha statue there like 30 years ago? The tree's like this high. It's so cute. And now it's like 25 feet high or so, 20 feet high. It's amazing. So the cypress tree in the courtyard. So from the Mumonkan, so we ended with gateless gate. We'll give woman the first word this time. The case. A monk asked Jiaozhou, what is the meaning of Bodhidharmas coming from the west? Jiaozhou said, the cypress tree in the courtyard. Woman's comment. If you can see intimately into the essence of Jiaozhou's response, there is no Shakyamuni in the past and no Maitreya in the future. Maitreya is the future Buddha. If you can see intimately into the essence of Jiaozhou's response, there is no Shakyamuni in the past and no Maitreya in the future. Words do not convey the fact. Language is not an expedient. Attached to words, your life is lost. Blocked by phrases, you are bewildered. That was Woman's verse. So for those of you, I should have said, this classic question, what is the meaning of Bodhidharmas coming from the West? Or what is the meaning of Bodhidharmas coming from India? Is the classic question that basically means, what is the point of the Dharma? What is the Dharma? It's like Bodhidharma came to the West in order to teach the Dharma, right? And it's a common kind of challenge, like if this, somebody comes to the Zen master and they want to test their acumen. They say, so why does Bodhidharma come from the West? And the teacher, it's like in Dharma combat, gives a response, and they're not going to say, oh, the Four Noble Truths and the thing and the thing. They might say anything to convey the sense of the Dharma and not just the words of the Dharma. And this is like one of the first times when this is the example given. And he says, the cypress tree in the courtyard. So what does he mean? Was there a cypress tree there that he was looking at? I think I read one commentary was imagining Zhaozhou staring out the window like some dumb monk is asking the same stupid question, like challenging him. He's just staring out the window. He's like, the cypress tree in the courtyard. Wake up. Maybe that's what happened. Maybe something else happened. In the Mana Shobogenzo, Dido Laurie's commentary. Oh, well, there's a longer form of the case, so I'll read the slightly longer form. A monastic asked Zhaozhou, what is the meaning of the ancestors coming from India, the cypress tree in the garden? The monastic said, Master, please don't teach using an object. Zhaozhou said, I am not showing an object to you. The monastic said, what is the meaning of the ancestors coming from India? Zhaozhou said, the cypress tree in the garden. Laurie Roshi says, Zhaozhou Zen cuts off the myriad streams and stuns the mind. There is just no place to take hold of. This cypress tree is not to be found in the world of phenomena, nor can it be found in the realm of emptiness. Then where shall we search for it? One we haven't quoted from yet, the Shoyo Roku, is the book of Serenity, or the book of Equanimity, another 100 cases. And this one also shows up there. And this one has a whole nother kind of form. It has these prefaces, then the main case, then appreciatory verse, and then commentary. So before you even get to the case, you read the preface to the assembly. The cypress tree in the garden, the flapping flag on the pole. That's an inside joke. As a blossom bespeaks the boundless spring, a dog bespeaks the ocean's water. The 500-year-old Buddha clearly leaves the usual stream, not falling into speech or thought. How do you express it? Attention! A monk asked Joshu, which is the Japanese for Zhaozhou. A monk asked Joshu, what is the meaning of Bodhidharmas coming from the West? Joshu answered, the cypress tree in the garden. Eyebrow banks, snow-tipped, river eyes embracing autumn, ocean mouth booming out waves, sail tongue drifting downstream, riot quelling hand, peacemaking strategy. Dear old Joshu, stirring up the monastery, he's not yet taken rest, uselessly rendering aid, making a cart and entering the well-worn ruts, basically untalented. He blocks up ravines and fills ditches. Sit with that for a while. This is the imagery is so powerful. I don't know, I keep commenting on it because I feel like I can't just read through it, but every time I say something, I feel like I shouldn't have said anything, so I apologize. So now to hear from Dogen again, in the Kana Shobogenzo, he has a whole fascicle, 36, the cypress tree. I printed very small, so Jiaozhou was asked by a monk, what is the meaning of Bodhidharma's coming from India? Jiaozhou said, the cypress tree in the garden. The monk said, Reverend, please do not use an object to guide me. Jiaozhou said, I am not using an object. The monk said, what is the meaning of Bodhidharma's coming from India? Jiaozhou said, the cypress tree in the garden. Although this koan originated with Jiaozhou, all Buddhas have in fact created it with their whole bodies. Who could own it? What we should learn from this is that the cypress tree in the garden is not an object. Bodhidharma's coming from India is not an object, and the cypress tree is not the self. Thus, there is just, Reverend, please do not use an object to guide me, and just, I am not using an object, which Reverend is hindered by Reverend. If not hindered, the Reverend is I, which I is hindered by I. Even if the I is hindered, it is a true person. What object is hindered by Bodhidharma comes from India? An object is always Bodhidharma's coming from India. However, Bodhidharma's coming from India and the object are not sequential. Bodhidharma's coming from India is not necessarily the treasury of the true Dharma I, the wondrous heart of nirvana. It is beyond this mind, beyond this Buddha, beyond this object. Get it? That's a real eyebrow pincher. I'm going to sit with that. And so I love to like read that and then go back to the other one and kind of what's the relationship between this verse and Dogen's commentary and Wumen's commentary, and then what can you come up with yourself? So many of us here have expressed the love of creativity and art, of writing, painting, drawing. To express a koan non-conceptually is one of the most beautiful art forms I find. And it would be wonderful if anyone wanted to take on a koan and express it. I invite you. As we're drawing down to time, I just want to tell you about, there's a few other ones that I'm not going to talk about tonight, but just to put it out there. One of my favorite koans, Nanchuan kills a cat. And this shows up in the Blue Cliff Record, the Gateless Gate, the Book of Serenity, and the Shobogenzo. That's one of a great kind of cross-referential ones. The other one that Dido Laurie actually talks about in his introduction, and it's a wonderful introduction, which has a few of the koans that kind of do that. And one of them is the 1,000 Arms and Eyes of Avalokiteshvara that we often talk about. You know, it's like putting your hand to the pillow at night, and then throughout the body, hands and eyes. And so it's in here, and it's in Dogen's Kana Shobogenzo as Avalokiteshvara, the fascicle Avalokiteshvara. And in his fascicles, Dogen is referencing, multiple koans. In fact, I think it was Dido Laurie who said he fully references 70 of the koans in this book, in the Kana Shobogenzo. And he partially references at least 250 throughout the Shobogenzo. So anybody that says Dogen wasn't into koans is just like, have you read Dogen? I don't know if anybody really says that, but it's often said. If anybody says Dogen's not into koan. So I want to end with another fun one, which is, I didn't say, throughout the body, hands and eyes. Another one is Gute or Juju, holds up one finger, the one finger Zen. For any question he was asked, he held up one finger. I won't tell you the rest, it's gruesome, but you can read it. Bodhidharma meets Emperor Wu, that's a great one, that's in Denkaroku and the other ones, about the questions he asked. Who are you? I don't know. What is the purpose? What merit do I get from all the things I've done? No merit. Well, what is the purpose? What's the purpose of all this stuff? Nothing holy. It's like, okay. to dive into that, into the total negation. Nothing special, nothing holy. Bodhidharma meets Emperor Wu. And finally, I just wanted to share Jiaozhou's wash your bowls, which is also similar to Jiaozhou's cup of tea. So a monk said to Jiaozhou, I have just entered this monastery, please teach me. Jiaozhou said, have you eaten your rice? The monk said, yes, I have. Jiaozhou said, wash your bowl. The monk understood. And Dogen talks about this, or one similar to this in his fascicle on everyday activity. And it's just a reminder of kind of what I was saying at the beginning, that every little thing we do is that moment, that immortalized moment, if we let it be. Woman said, comments on this case, Jiaozhou opened his mouth and showed his gallbladder, his heart, and his liver. I hope he did not mistake the bell for a jar. In the equanimity, sorry, the book of Serenity, the book of equanimity, the appreciatory verse is, when the rice is finished, have him wash the bowl. Suddenly, the mind ground naturally meets itself. Right then, the monastery's guest is replete. Tell me, is any enlightenment in there or not? There's a similar koan, which I'll end with, which is Jiaozhou's cup of tea, another everyday. Jiaozhou asked, Jiaozhou asked a newly arrived monastic, have you been here before? The monastic said, yes, I have been here. Jiaozhou said, have a cup of tea. Later, he asked another monastic, have you been here before? The monastic said, no, I haven't been here before. Jiaozhou said, have a cup of tea. The monastery director then asked Jiaozhou, aside from the one who has been here, why did you say, have a cup of tea to the one who had not been here? Jiaozhou said, director. The director responded, yes. Jiaozhou said, have a cup of tea. So today he might say, Jiaozhou might say, please put on your mask, whether you've been here or not. Thank you.